taking the time to be here, and all of you for taking time out from your day. It's a privilege to serve in the capacity that I do. That's even more so privilege for people like you to take time out to let me see you like this. We're on a 32-county tour, and I know a lot of people think that during recess we go to the beach or something. It's not the case. And again, this is the most enjoyable part of my job. I want to thank Terry Lynn and Mark for being here, and all of the elected officials. I saw all the mayors passing through and told them that local service. I love what you let me do now, and I'm chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, as the mayor mentioned. But I got to tell you, the best 4 years of my life was serving as a mayor, and I hope that all of you who are serving locally feel that same way. In particular, I want to thank the sheriff and deputies for being here. One of the things that I hope is happening here is that people in this area are showing you the kind of support and appreciation for what you do that all of us feel. So what I've been doing at these meetings, and I really just want to hear from you, and hear any questions or comments. I'll be as transparent as possible. I always am, but I'd like to make some opening comments and just hear from you whatever's on your mind and try to answer your questions to the best of my ability. But this presidential race has been something very different than I think most people thought it was going to be a year ago. The outcomes in the primaries and just the way they went has been different. I think everybody would acknowledge that. And a big part of that, I think, is driven by some of the economic insecurity that people are feeling. If you look around our state, people who had high school degrees and done everything that they thought was right in life, or even a couple of years of community college. In many cases, people are just not seeing the opportunities that they thought they would see. The wages have been stagnant in many ways, and that's bred just a lot of concern. And I went in business, as the mayor mentioned, at a young age, and I remember when I was first in business, I would drive down the road, and I built small construction projects in the beginning. Over time, and larger ones scattered out around the country, but I would stop at a payphone booth to call my assistant or a subcontractor or a supplier and hope that I had the right change, but in hope that the line wasn't busy, and in hope that if I called my office, the person there hadn't stepped away from the phone. But it was hard. It was really hard to get things done. And then, over time, I ended up with one of those big brick phones in the middle of my car, and I was in exactly the right location. I could get a signal. Sometimes that was difficult. And then now, last week I was traveling throughout the state in a lot of very rural areas, and my chief of staff was in Israel looking at some of the security issues that they are dealing with. We have a memorandum of understanding that's coming up. It's going to be completed very soon, but it was a cinch. I was able to talk to my staffer in Israel. We text back and forth, email back and forth, no problem. I remember how we did contracts. We used to FedEx contracts out to people, and it would take a couple of days for it to get to them, and then they would mark up their changes. You were probably an attorney then, not a judge, that's right. And it would take up to 10 days or 2 weeks to get them contracts out. Today, again, with one of these, you can change it back and forth in a couple of hours and actually sign it on one of these, and it's a binding document. I think we make more mistakes today than we used to by taking our time, but the fact is it's much more rapid. About 4 months ago, Volkswagen had this big meeting in Chattanooga and said they were going to have a driverless car that was going to be built in Chattanooga. And it's exciting to think about building things like that in Tennessee, but you fast forward that on out. I saw where another company today announced the same thing. I think it was Ford. But I've got a good friend that most of y'all know very well that builds truck stops around the country, and they project in the trucking industry that in 10 years all 18 wheelers are going to be driverless. And again, it just points to the changes. Yeah, you're looking at me. I saw a retired truck driver. I saw a guy in one of the small counties I was in last week who just retired from truck driving. He said he's retired because he thinks they're driverless already. And just to go down that vein, Volkswagen actually came to the Senate office building about 3 weeks ago, and they brought, had their executives standing on the sidewalk, or some of them, and they had this guy who had come in from Europe and a guy who had come in from California to show me how this driverless car was going to work. And so I went out on the interstate with them, and it didn't work. So I was so embarrassed for these young people who'd come in. I never mentioned it to the executives when I got back. I figured out how it was going to work. But they say you're going to be driving to work these days, going to Nashville from here, for instance, and sitting in traffic, and you're going to be working your computer. You're not going to be driving. So again, I say all this to say the world's changed. Technology is changing. It's changing the way we do business. And for some people, actually good numbers of people, a lot of folks are being left behind. It's creating insecurities that I think have affected in many ways this race. And I hope that by the time we all either do the early voting or reach the first Tuesday in November, we're going to have good sense, especially of what the main candidates are going to propose as it relates to economic growth in our country. It's obviously been tepid, and a lot of people, again, feeling pressures of rising costs and not seeing rising salaries. One of the things that won't be discussed, unfortunately, is the deficit issue and the huge amount of indebtedness that our country has. 19 trillion in debt today. Mark and Terry Lynn have to balance their budget each year. The county mayor has to do the same. I was commissioner of finance back in the day, if you will, during a really tough financial time. And look, we just had to make cuts. I mean, we had to make it work out. And at the federal level, because we're a great nation, people want to loan us money. And unfortunately, the federal government is taking them up on it. So we have 19 trillion in debt today. CBO projects that in 10 years we'll have 29 trillion in debt. By the way, those numbers are always rosy projections. It always ends up being worse than the projection is. And we have about $100 trillion in what's called unfunded liabilities, where we've made commitments to people that we don't have the money to honor. So, I think it's the #1 threat to our country. The military leaders that you talk with, most of them will tell you, yeah, Russia's a threat, China's a threat over time. ISIS is a threat. Certainly Iran getting a nuclear weapon is a threat. But the greatest threat to our nation is our own inability to deal with our fiscal issues. And yet my guess is that during this campaign, there'll be zero discussion about that issue, which is disappointing. I think most elected officials here will tell you, contrary to what the public believes, that when you run for public office, you actually try to do what you say. I know it's a fact. I mean, people really do. I think they keep, I know we keep ledgers of anything we said. We attempt, when I was mayor during the first 6 months, we had, done all the things that we said, or begun all the things we said we were going to do. And yet, what's happening, and what will happen, I fear, over the next couple of months, is there'll be no discussion about this issue because it involves some tough choices. Choices, on the other hand, that can be made without affecting people in adverse ways. But we got to start. We got to start making those choices. And then finally, what will be discussed, I think, is America's role in the world. We've had a lot of foreign policy decisions made by people on both sides of the aisle that have turned out to be mistakes. I think people understand that. And that's caused a retrenchment to take place in many Americans' minds relative to what the U.S. role in the world needs to be. I've been to 70 countries representing you. I appreciate that. I go to, just like in your jobs, 80% of what we do is, what I do is focus on problems. 20% is on opportunities. And so I've been to many of these countries over and over again. But I got to tell you, a world without U.S. leadership, I think, is a world that people here would not want to live in. And, you know, we don't need to be the cops of the world in question. It's almost a trite comment. But we do need to continue our leadership role. We cannot just focus within our borders and live in a world that is the kind of world you can raise your children in. And, you know, while we're paying a lot of attention to this presidential race, people around the world are doing the same thing, even if they don't agree with us on numbers of things, because they're aware of the tremendous difference that the United States makes in the world, and espousing free enterprise, making sure that the world moves more in that direction, something that we all embraced here, that we espouse the values that have made our nation great around the world, and that we do what we can diplomatically to try to diffuse conflicts before they turn into great problems. So with that, again, let me stop. I appreciate Representative Black's representative being here, and I think Lamar's, that's all Evans, so close I can't sing, being here, and all of you for taking the time to be out. I'll be glad to take